monks and nuns. So we're very happy I want to welcome everyone, but then of course especially Nick. Thank you very much for being willing to monks and nuns to give this talk. I want to welcome everyone, but then of course especially Nick. Thank you very much for being willing to. I hear myself talking. Monks and nuns to give this talk. I want to welcome everyone. Nick. Okay, sure. Yeah? Okay. So maybe we start with 3 times setting of motivation, and that we want to use this life to reach enlightenment, to develop more love, compassion, to develop more wisdom, and that we want to use this life to benefit others. We want to follow all the advice of all our teachers. So you can do that by doing 3 times the mantra Buddha Shakyamuni. So I will do the recitation. So otherwise, if we do it all together, due to time differences, it will be a cacophony of sounds. Jayanta Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Soam Jayanta Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Soam Jayanta Om Muni Muni Ma Muni So again, welcome. Nick, are you willing to introduce yourself? And do it a bit slowly because, as you know, we have 3 languages in which it has to be translated: Spanish, French, and Italian. So I hope you have some experience with speaking slowly, and so that the translators can keep up. Are you willing to translate to introduce yourself, Nick?
Sure. Should I speak in English?
Yes, you speak in English.
Because that's all I know.
We have no English translator. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's a great honor to be here on this really special day. As Lama said, on this day 50 years ago, it's a very remarkable revolutionary explosion of energy. So that's what we're commemorating today. I have been involved in Dharma, the FPMT, as a student of Lama Yeshe Zopa Rinpoche since October 1972. So that's 51 years ago, pretty basically. And since that time, I've been working in various capacities for the FPMT. Before that, I was practicing medicine in Australia, and for various reasons, I got disillusioned with that. And my girlfriend at the time and I decided to travel the world, take a break from Australia and from medicine, and travel the world for 4 years. She was Marie Obst, who the nun Yeshe Kado, who many of you will know, of course. So I've written more about how I got into the Dharma in an article that I wrote originally for Mandala called The Road to Kopan. Different people had been writing about how they got to Kopan for the first time. So some of these things, Drokala will be putting links into the chat. So the story of how I got to Kopan is there, so I don't really need to repeat that. And there's more about my first experiences at the third meditation course, which was the one in November 72. And what led me to become a monk is also, I wrote an article for the Tibetan Review in 1979, and the link to that article should also be in the chat, why I became a monk. It's called On Becoming a Monk. But basically, I left Australia in May. We left Australia in May in 1972, spent a couple of months in Bali, traveled through Southeast Asia. I got interested in knowing more about Buddhism in Thailand. We were in Bangkok, and true confession, I stole my first Dharma book from a bookshop in Bangkok. I'm still working that karma off, mainly by carrying boxes of books. And the book was by Christmas Humphreys, called Buddhism. And in it, he talked. What happened? Something went wrong with my screen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes. Now you're back. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So the book talked about meditation. I didn't know what that was, but I kind of made a mental note to find out. And as I was reading the book, though, something stirred in my heart. I call it my second religious experience. My first religious experience was when I heard my first live jazz band. That was some years before that. And reading this book, I thought, this stuff sounds like it could be true, which was, and I can't remember exactly what it was. He talked about karma, he talked about emptiness, a little bit, I don't know. Anyway, so I had made an arrangement to meet a friend in Kathmandu. The details are in my article. And we found out that there was a meditation course, Buddhist meditation course, starting at Kopan the following week. So we went up, enrolled. We did the third course, and kind of blew my mind. And although I didn't accept everything that was being taught, I hadn't accepted everything that was taught by Rinpoche. By the end of the course, I knew I couldn't leave. And Marie felt the same, so we both stayed on. Most of the other people, there were about 50 people at the course, most of them left and went to India or back west, or I don't know where they went. So just 3 or 4 of us stayed on. Peter Kedge was there helping Anila Ann, the Canadian nun, run the course, and then Lama sent him to Dharamsala, to Tushita. So there were just 3 or 4 of us at Kopan at that time, getting involved and helping get ready for the 4th course, which was to be held in March 1973. So I don't know exactly what it was, but I remember we had a group photo at the top of the Kopan Hill after the course, and I went to Rinpoche and I said, Rinpoche, thank you for changing my life. He just giggled. And then a day or 2 later, I was talking to Anila Ann, the Canadian nun, and who had been at Kopan for a few years at that point, 2 or 3 years at that point. And I said to her, I think I want to do Dharma. I'm not quite sure what I meant by that, but, I wanted to sort of do Dharma full time, but how would I support myself? I didn't have that much money. And she looked at me as if I was a bit simple and said, oh, if you give yourself to the Dharma will always look after you. So I was like, oh, okay. So here we are, 51 years later. I don't know how much I've given myself to the Dharma, but the Dharma has certainly looked after me. So at that course, we were given this book, this textbook, Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun, which was the notes from the second course, which had been in the spring of 1972. March 72, and the students had put together these notes, and so Rinpoche would read from this book, and a few sentences, or one sentence, or a paragraph, and then he would give a commentary. So that's pretty much how the course went on. And so after the course, I went to Rinpoche and I said, "This is a really life-changing book. This is great, but I think it could use a bit of work because it was a little bit rough, editorially speaking." And Rinpoche said, "Well, yes, that was just put together by the students. I have my own ideas about how it should be, and if you'd like to work with me on it, we can work on it for the next course." So I said, "Yes, I like." So then for about 6 weeks after that, Yeshe Kado and I, we took refuge after that first course. She was given the name Yeshe Kado. I was given the name Thupten Zopa, which I was never brave enough to use. So, and they called me Dr. Nick anyway, so that's kind of who I am. I never really was Thupten Zopa. And so we worked with Rinpoche several hours every day for about 6 weeks. We went through the thing cover to cover, reorganizing it a bit. And I didn't type. And so we write it down, then Yeshe Kado would type it up, and then I'd edit it, and then we put it together. And so then we made a new edition for the fourth course. So that's kind of how I got into this editing thing and working with the Lama's teachings. After the course, also, we did a 1 week Lam Rim retreat. So at Kopan at the time, there was the old house, where the Lamas had first moved to when they got the place with Zena in 1969. And then they just built the Gompa, not the one that's there now, the one that was there before. They built that in the spring of 1972. So when the third course was the first course in the Gompa. And then there was another little row of buildings called the Sangha House. There were like 6 meditation cells or something. So we did retreat in those rooms, just down from the Gompa. And I didn't really know how to do analytical meditation. So my meditation was, when I was trying to meditate, I would explain, like visualize one of my friends or my mother or my brother. I'd visualize me explaining this teaching to them and them arguing about how it was wrong, and then me arguing how it was right. And we had this debate, and then I always won. And I was so fired up by then I would write the person a letter. So I finished up writing about 50, which you're not supposed to do in retreat, as I'm sure you all know better than I do, but that's what I did. And I sent these letters to all these people in Australia, and about 20 or 25 of them showed up for the next course, for the fourth course, including my mother. And of course, most of my friends saw it as a good excuse to come to Kathmandu and get stoned, smoke dope. But they did finish up doing the course, most of them, and then they went back to Australia. And in a way, that's one of the reasons that the Lama's teachings took hold in Australia fairly quickly. And of course, in 1974, they went there and did the first Lam Rim course out of Nepal. So that was the fourth course, and there'd been about 54 people at the third course, and of those people, I think 14 or 15 finished up getting ordained over the next 2 or 3 years, which is quite a large percentage of people from a Kopan course. And the fourth course, there are about 120 people. And then after the course, we went to Laudo, some of us, and I've written about that. There should be a link to this also in the chat. It's called My First Trip to Laudo, which I wrote a little while ago for the Laudo newsletter. So while I was there, we set up a medical clinic, Yeshikado and I, at the Laudo Gompa. That was also fairly new, that building. And a lot of these people who came from Australia for the fourth course brought medicines and stuff. We set up a clinic at Kopan as well after the course and after the third course. And so I got people, and I wrote to drug companies and they sent stuff. So it was quite helpful, I think. And we were staying at Rinpoche's house at Ganupa, which is about a 15-minute walk away from the Laudo Gompa. And Gareth Sparham was there, and Jumpa Jerky, Jamyang Wongmo, Heli, Spanish nun, and American couple, Dick and Meredith, who were involved at the beginning of Vajrapani Institute, and Yeshikado and me, so about 6 of us. And I got hepatitis and had to stay in the house for a few weeks. And while I was there, I started editing my notes and from the third and fourth courses. And also Brian Beresford had come from Dharamsala, Brian and Marie Beresford, and they'd been studying at the Tibetan Library. And he took a lot of notes at the fourth course. So I had his notes and my notes, and then I edited them and put them together as a sort of commentary of the Golden Sun. So we finished up publishing that, these notes as the Meditation Course Notes, Volume 1. So, but while I was doing that, I realized how much of Rinpoche's teachings we were missing by just taking notes. And we didn't have electricity or tape recorders at Kopan back then. So I made a determination to the next course, the 5th course, to try and write down everything he said. So that was one thing that came out of, one determination that came out of editing. The other thing that happened when I was editing these teachings, especially on the perfect human rebirth, as you all know, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of the 10 richnesses are, being born in the center of a religious country, having perfect organs, and not having created one of the 5 immediate negativities. So the benefit of, Rinpoche explained, the benefit of living in the definition of a central country, of a Buddhist country, is that the lineage of the ordination still exists, so you can become ordained. The benefit of having perfect organs is that you don't have any disqualification from being ordained. You can become a monk or a nun. And the 4th one, not having committed one of those 5 extreme negative actions, one of the benefits is, apart from not going to hell, one of the benefits is that you can get ordained. So, I was thinking about this, and I had those 3 richnesses, the benefit of which is getting ordained. So I thought, well, why shouldn't I get ordained? I have this incredible opportunity. So that was a bit of a scary thought. So while I was still stewing on that, one day there was a knock at the door, and there was this Tibetan guy. He showed up, and he had all this stuff. He had robes and a little Buddha statue and some other things that had apparently, I found out later, had belonged to a nun who had died at the Tamo nunnery just down the hill from Laudo. Tupan Pende knows it well. And so he was wanting to sell this stuff. So I thought, well, I've been thinking about becoming a monk. Maybe I should buy these robes. And if I don't use them, I can always sell them down in Boda for a profit. So I bought these robes and this other stuff. And then when Yeshikado came back from the Gompa that day, I said, guess what I bought? She says, I don't know what. I said, I bought some robes. So she was a bit shocked. And anyway, I said, but, I don't necessarily use them. I can always sell them for a profit. So, like that. So in the end, I didn't sell them. I finished up using them. So then Laudo finished. We went back to Kopan, and that was the 5th course. There were about 200 people there. A bunch of people came from Dharamsala. And I did sit right in front of Rinpoche, and I wrote down nearly every word he said. And by the end, it was a terrible scrawl writing. It was hard for me to read, but Yeshikado could read it perfectly for some reason. So she typed it up, and then I edited, and then we published this one. This is meditation course notes too. These are the notes from the 5th course. I think there should be a link in the chat to the transcript of this. So you can see the difference from, this is 2 courses, just, taking notes here and there. And this is from a transcript. So we really did miss a lot. We would have missed a lot if we hadn't taken it all down. So anyway, then we got electricity, and then we got tape recorders. And then since then, we've been recording and transcribing all of the Kopan courses. And out of the 50 or so that Rinpoche's taught at, since then, I think about 30 of them are online now. And we're hoping to get them all online in the next year, by the end of next year or two. And we were able to do all this printing because we got our own duplicating machine. So we had our own little printing press up at Kopan, and the Tibetan monks also used it. They would write on the stencils by hand in Tibetan script, and they'd print it so they could print all their texts as well. So at that course, there were about 10 people, 3 from Dharamsala, 7 from Kopan, who wanted to get ordained. And so that's when Lama called this meeting 50 years ago today and established the IMI. So the talk that Lama gave us should also be in, the link to that should also be in the chats. We published it in this book, Advice for Monks and Nuns, and this is online or as an ebook. We don't have hard copies anymore, but the Lama's first talk to us that he gave 50 years ago is online. So the 10 people who wanted to get ordained were there, and there were a number of people who had already been ordained. Zena was the first, but she was in retreat up in Solakumbu at Thupten Churling Monastery, Tulsi Rinpoche's monastery. I never met her because she died while we were in Laudo in 73. And by the time I got there in 72, she had already gone. But she was the first nun. Then there was Jampa Sangpo, Mark Shaneman. He was one of the first monks. There was another monk called James. I never met him. I don't know what happened to him. There was Mummy Max and Anila Ann got ordained around 1970. I think by Geshe Rapton in Dharamsala, and another nun, Sylvia, from Los Angeles. I've never met her. She disrobed fairly quickly, I think. Then there was Ngawang Kedup, Ron Brooks, an American monk who'd been ordained by Trushi Rinpoche in, I think, 71. And then Ngawang Chodak was ordained by Trushi Rinpoche in 72. So there are a few, so some of them were at this meeting as well. And also Anila Suzanne Lee, Jampa Chösam, the English nun, she was ordained in 73, and Heli, the Spanish nun, Jampa Cherki, Jamyang Wongmo now, she was ordained in 73. They were also ordained by Geshe Rapton. So that was the end of 1973. And in January 74, His Holiness was giving Kala Chakra in Bodh Gaya. So we all went down to Bodh Gaya. A lot of the Kopan monks went. There was a big exodus from Kopan, a bunch of Westerners, including us 10 who wanted to get ordained. And after the Kala Chakra initiation, first of all, everyone went by to look at the mandala and get a blessing from His Holiness. And then we went up as a group, the 10 of us, and we had shaved our heads. I couldn't do this now, but there was a little tuft of hair left for His Holiness to snip. You know, the monks and nuns know the drill. And His Holiness looked at us in surprise. He manifested surprise and said, "What's this?" And Rinpoche explained that, we were the Western students, we were about to get ordained. His Holiness just kind of sat back and looked and said, "Well, I hope it lasts." That hope wasn't really fulfilled, I must say, for most of us. But then we were ordained by His Holiness Ling Rinpoche, and in the group was Serkung Tsenshab Rinpoche, and Lati Rinpoche, and Lama Yeshe, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So it was a pretty heavy crew ordaining us. I remember then, so the monks went first. There were 4 of us, and the 6 nuns. So there was Pende and Gareth Sparham and and Marcel. Yeah, Marcel, how could I forget? And me, 4 monks, and then nuns were Yeshikado and Thupten Pemo. So Pemo, unfortunately, we know passed away a few months ago, but Yeshikado and Pemo were the only ones who really kept it together until Pemo until the end. Yeshikado is still with us. And Thupten Wongmo was one of the nuns. She disrobed for a year or so a while back and then re-robed. So that doesn't really count as unbroken. And there was another nun, Ursula Bernice. She passed away 20 years or so ago. She disrobed in 77. And there was Nicole, who's married to Peter Kedge, Nicole, and Thupten Cherky, Spring Livingston, Deborah Livingston, a young American girl from Dharamsala. So I think that's 6. And then Rinpoche's mother was also ordained with the nuns. So I remember after that, we were sort of hanging out in our gender groups, and then Yeshikado came down the road in Bodh Gaya, and she said to me, "I'm so happy I could burst." I always remember that. So it was a really great day. 50 years ago, not 50 years ago, that was January the 14th, 1974. So we were all given Tibetan names, of course, and Yeshikado was given the name Thupten Kunsang, and then she started using that, and Lama Yeshe looked very hurt when he heard that and said, "Don't you like the name I gave you?" which was Yeshikado. So she said, "Oh yeah." So she became still. She kept that name, refuge name Yeshikado. I got the name Thupten Donyo, and I was very disappointed because that was the same name as Piero. I really didn't want to have the same name as Piero, but it was my karma. And anyway, I was still Dr. Nick, so I didn't have to use that either. So I had 2 names that I didn't use. Thupten Pende, of course, still is Thupten Pende, because who'd want to be called Jim Doherty, So then we went back to Kopan, and then we started figuring out how to be IMI Sangha, how to live together, how to make a Western Sangha community. And we really didn't have any role models. We didn't quite know how to do it or what we were expected to do, but the lamas were there giving us guidance. By that time, the lamas had moved up into the new Gompa, and so we were given the old house, and some of us stayed there. And there, above the house, there was old kitchen and storeroom and another building, servants' quarters, I think they probably were. So some of the nuns lived up there, and then we set up our own kitchen, and then two of us would take it in turns to cook every day for the others. And so our routine was, from memory, something like we got up in the morning, 5 or so, we did a Jorcha puja, and then we were served in the old, it was called the Chenrezig Gompa back then. Well, no, it wasn't called the Chenrezig Gompa, but anyway, it was this big room in the old house. It was the room where Zini used to stay. The lamas stayed in small rooms to the side. So that was our Gompa, and then the two people who were doing the cooking for that day would serve breakfast, and then in the morning we'd do our own work, study, whatever we were into, helping around the place, and then we'd come together for lunch. We did Vajrasattva, Dorji Sempa Puja before lunch, and then we had lunch, and then the afternoons again were free to study, or some of us were already editing and working on teachings and transcripts and stuff. Some people like to meditate. I was never really into that. Then we didn't have an evening meal. We had tea, and then at night we did Mahakala Puja. Lama gave us forearm Mahakala as the protector of the IMI. So I don't know if you guys still do that, but forearm Mahakala is the IMI protector.
No, we don't do that anymore. Also at the advice of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's now most six-arm Mahakala. Oh,
okay. Anyway, back then we did forearm Mahakala, but the monks are now more advanced now, so they have 6 arms, instead of 4. So then Lama gave teachings on the tantric vows, because we'd all received the highest yoga tantra initiation, Kala Chakra, and Lama also gave us Haruka Vajrasattva initiation and a commentary. So this is the original commentary. Not very big, but this is what we took into retreat, because that summer a bunch of us went up to Laudo to do retreat, and there was also a group Vajrasattva retreat at Kopan led by Anila Ann. So some of the monks and nuns stayed for that, and a bunch of lay people stayed for that. And some of us went up to Laudo to do our individual retreats. Thupten Pende was at the Tamo Nunnery. Luckily, he hadn't studied Uncle Tomba at that point. There were 3 women staying at Ganupa House. There was Ursula and Bonnie and Spring, so two of the new nuns, and Konchog Donma, Bonnie, who became a nun the next year. And then Harvey and Peter, who were lay people, they were in a house in Mende, down below Laudo. And Ngawan Chodak, who'd been ordained by Tulsi Rinpoche in, I think it's in 73. He was at Rinpoche's uncle's cave above the Charok cave, and I was in the Charok cave. Then Nicole and Thupten Walmo did a retreat somewhere I think in Jinbezi or someplace. They did a retreat together. So that was our summer of 74, doing Vajrasattva retreat. Also that summer, the Lamas made their first trip to the West. They went to America. Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche went to America with Sister Max, and they gave teachings that were published in the book Wisdom Energy, which I'll get to in a minute. And then they came back, and then they went to Australia to do a series of teachings there. Mainly they gave a Lum Rim course in Queensland, near where Chenrezig Institute is today. And so they went with Anila Ann, and Yeshikado went ahead to help prepare for the course. And it was the first Lum Rim Kopan style course outside Australia, outside Nepal. And after the course, they were shown the land at Udlo, and it was offered as to be a center. So that became the Lamas, that became Chenrezig Institute. Actually, in America, there was an American student from Indiana called Louis Bob Wood, and she offered to start a center in Indiana. It was called the Bodhicitta Center for Human Potential, something like that. So that was actually the first FPMT center outside of Asia. But later on, when the FPMT became an organization, she didn't want to be part of an organization. So that center sort of fizzled out. So really, Chenrezig Institute is the first Western center that lasted. So that came about after the 1974 trip. And Anila Ann stayed in Australia to be the director. So I think we all had really great, most of us, as far as I know, had great experiences doing Vajrasattva retreat. I'm not going to go into it now because it's a little bit off topic here, but I'm supposed to write about my second trip to Laudo early next year, so I might write about it there. So then we came back from Laudo, and then there was the seventh course. And because Anila Ann, who had assisted Rinpoche in the previous courses as the sort of the course leader, she stayed in Australia. So then I was the course leader for the seventh course. And at that course, Rinpoche split the students into two groups. The newcomers were in the tent. So the fifth course was the first course that couldn't be held in the Gompa because there were too many people. So we built this big tent in the backyard behind the Gompa, and that was the main course venue. And in the actual Gompa, the old students and the Sangha were given special teachings by Rinpoche on Jocha and Dungshak, the 35 Buddhas. And I remember I was kind of babysitting all the new students, and I was very resentful that all the others were getting these advanced teachings, and I had to babysit the new students. I mean, sometimes you don't recognize the opportunities that you have. Anyway, so that seventh course, there were a couple of hundred people there again. So that was so that was special. I didn't mention actually earlier in the year the sixth course. That's right, I jumped a course. So the sixth course, there were 250 people there, and that was far too many for Kopan to handle. And we got these old Indian Army tents for people to stay in, and they were leaking, and it rained a lot in that course. So it was very uncomfortable, and about 70 people finished up leaving the course. And I think Rinpoche hurried them on their way by teaching on the eight worldly dharmas and the hell realms for about 10 days. So that got rid of the tourists. But it was a big disruption having 250 come and then 70 people leave. And also at that time, Song Rinpoche came and gave teachings to the Kopan monks, and he gave us some talks to the Westerners as well. So that was kind of special, the 6th course. But as a result of that experience, we decided before the next Kopan course, the 7th course, to do interviews, not for us to judge whether people could do the course or not, but to let them know what they were in for, and to make them understand that they had to come to all the sessions, meditation and the teachings. So the interviews were done by Thupten Pende and Ngawan Chodak. So I always thought of them as kind of the Mormon monks, because they were these clean-cut American boys, very religious, and spreading the Dharma. So they did the interviews, and despite that, 200 people did the course. So that was the 7th course, and that pretty much took care of 1974. So then in 1975, the lamas were. So in the meantime, the Sangha activities, IMI activities are going on there in the old Gomba, doing the pujas in the morning and stuff. Also, the other thing about the 6th course was that we, the new monks and nuns, one of our jobs there for these 250 unruly people was to walk around during the sessions and catch the people who were missing the sessions and send them back into the tent. So we were called the Dharma police. So that was one of the early jobs the IMI Sangha had to do, had to police the lay people, make them go back. You will meditate whether you like it or not. So that probably helped some of them leave as well. Anyway, so 1975, the lamas were invited to go to many different countries, this time on the Second World Tour. And for some reason, I was chosen to accompany them as the roadie and the meditation leader, the discussion group leader. So that was going to be my 1975. But before that, there was quite a bit of excitement at Kopan. In January 1975, Yangtze Rinpoche was enthroned at the beginning of the January. So that was a huge occasion for the lamas and the local Tibetan community, of course. So that was a great occasion. And then Gomchen La, a great meditator from Solo Khumbu, came and he gave teachings on guru practice. That teaching's online. And then the great Kuno Lama Rinpoche came to Boda, and Rinpoche took the Sangha down to receive teachings from Kuno Lama Rinpoche. So that was pretty amazing. And he gave a commentary on Atisha's Lam Dun and a commentary on Foundation of All Good Qualities. He gave 2 teachings, both are online. And I'm sure everybody knows who Kuno Lama Rinpoche is, but he was the lay lama that gave teachings to His Holiness on the Bodhicharyavatara. So he's well known for that. And Lama also gave us teachings on the Manjushri yoga practice. So the first retreat Lama wanted us to do was Vajrasattva, then the second was Manjushri. So that took care of most of January and February 75, and then I went with the lamas to Darjeeling, where they had met Zena, where they'd stayed for a while when they were down from Buxa, from the refugee camp. And Rinpoche had a trunk of robes and special things. So we went there, we collected this trunk, and then we went back to Dharamsala. And in Dharamsala was the second group ordination, and that was conducted by, it was supposed to be by Ling Rinpoche, but he couldn't do it for some reason. So then Lati Rinpoche conducted it. There was who was there. This was, I call, the rise of the Konchogs. So there was Bonnie, Konchog Donma, and Yogi, the Black American monk, Konchog, I forget what his name was, Konchog Jumper, was it? I forget. Everyone, we still called him Yogi. And John Fay, Konchog Lundup, and Jeffrey Webster, Konchog Yatso, and Bruno Leguevel, Konchog Yeshe, and Dieter, German monk, Konchog Sherab. Forget Yogi's name. Anyway, so there were 6 ordained. So that was starting to swell the ranks of the IMI Sangha. And then after that ordination, then I took off with the lamas, and we went to Bangkok. Dick and Meredith had organized a weekend seminar. And then we went to Australia, New Zealand, America, England, Switzerland, and Italy. So there were teachings, courses in all those different places. And so when we arrived in Sydney, I went to Melbourne with Lama, and Roger Kunsang had been at the 6th course. He arranged the Sydney visit, and he rented us a house south of Sydney. So Rinpoche did retreat with Roger looking after him. So there were some seeds planted there. And I went to Melbourne with Lama, and Lama gave a 5-day course, which is in the book we published called Ego, Attachment, and Liberation. So then we came back to Sydney, then Lama did retreat, and then there was a 10-day course on the 37 practices, which is a teaching that His Holiness had given before the Kala Chakra in 74. So then I had to give this teaching course on 37 practices, which was a bit scary. So they rented this kind of Boy Scouts camp nearby, and Rinpoche stayed in the back room during the course, and then I had to give this commentary on the 37 practices, except I got Rinpoche to give the teachings on the emptiness verses, which I still couldn't do even now, and to give the precepts. So so then we went up to Chenrezig and did the first course. They'd built a Gompa by then. In just less than a year, they'd built a Gompa, and the lamas gave a 1-month course at Chenrezig in the Gompa. And so during that summer, some of the IMI Sangha went to Laudo. They did Manjushri retreat. I think, as I recall, was Yeshikado, Sangye Kado. So during Song Rinpoche's visit to the 6th course, Sangye Kado got ordained, and the American guy, Steve Molaski, who's now called Steve Pearl, he got ordained, Tupan Samten, and an American woman called Linda something, she got ordained, but we lost track of her pretty quickly. I don't know what happened to her. So there were 3 ordained at that time. Of course, Sangye Kado, Kathleen McDonald, everybody knows. She's one of the celebrity nuns. So YK, Sangye Kado, Pemo, and John Fay, I think they did Manjushri retreat up in Laudo in the Gompa. And then I don't know what the others did. I think some of them went to Dharamsala. Some of them did go to Dharamsala, because when we were in Sydney, I think we heard that 4 of our monks, 4 monks had been ordained. They were Gelong ordination from His Holiness. I think Pende, yes, and Piero and Gareth and Alan Wallace, I think I heard. So
also Steve Molaski.
Oh, he got Gelong at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here I was. So when we got ordained, the way all you hardliners, monks and nuns know that you sit in the order that you're ordained. So if you're ordained in a group, the first one who goes up to the preceptor is the first in line. So in our group, I was the first. So I used to sit at the head of the line. So now when I heard that these others got Gelong ordination, it means I have to sit down the line. I told Lama how disappointed I was not to have been there. So he was shocked. He said, "I can't believe your mind. You know, the things I worry about, where I'm sitting in the line. I lost my first place." Anyway, so he said, anyway, so what happened was, he said, when we got back from the world trip, so I won't, I don't think I'll go into it too much. If everybody knows Big Love, right? Volume 1. I need to work out more to pick these up. Volume 1, Volume 2. So a lot of these stories and the details are in these books. And honestly, if you haven't read them, you're not doing your duty as an IMI Sangha, for sure. You have to read these books to know what you're really a part of. We gave them free, I think, to all the Sangha. Okay, so in the world tour, we went around to these different places that I mentioned, and then when we got back to Dharamsala, Lama said I could take Gelong ordination. So he expressed some doubt. He said, "I don't really know if, after what you said about where you sit in line, I don't know if you really deserve to be a Gelong, but okay." So then I got Gelong ordination by myself, alone, with Serkong Rinpoche. And then Lama dragged some of these other Geshis who were doing retreat around Tushita out, and with him and Rinpoche. So, because for Gelong you needed 10 fully ordained monks who'd been ordained for 10 years or more, I believe. So Lama looked at me and said, you should feel some shame, everybody's looking at you, So anyway, I guess he could see what was to come. So then after the course, so my phone just lost my Zoom screen. There we are. So when we got back to Kopan, there was the what was it? The 8th course. It was led by Marcel, and then after that course, I think it was the first Kopan group retreat that was led by Marcel. I remember. Sorry. There was a first Lam group retreat led by Marcel.
Marcel led the group retreat after the 7th.
Oh, was that was the first one? Was it?
I led the group retreat after the 8th.
Oh, okay, good. So and then that became a bit of a tradition. I remember we were trying to set up publishing at Kopan too. So I spent 1975 day in and day out for like 9 months with the lamas. So getting back, I felt a bit sort of bereft, because then Marcel was leading the course, and I'd sort of been this important person. Then all of a sudden I was nobody. So, but I got busy sort of working on transcribing teachings and doing publishing. And I remember we needed to get money. So I had a local carpenter make little tables, because all these people were doing retreats and they needed little tables to put their books on and stuff. So we had this, I made this little business. It was called the Inji Lama Puja Tables. So the slogan was, "Don't be stingy, buy an Inji." And I'm trying to sell these puja tables for 200 or 300 rupees to the retreaters. So it was one of my first business ventures, trying to raise money for publishing. We've evolved since then. So then one day I was standing on the steps of the Kopan Gompa with Lama, and he looked way into the distance, and he said, I think we need an organization to keep all this together. So I kind of looked into the distance to see what he was looking at, but I couldn't see anything. But I think Lama could see the growing mandala. And because during that trip, more centers had started, Manjushri Institute, and the seeds were laid for Vajrapani Institute and Dorji Chung in New Zealand, and Lama Tsongkhapa was really laid the next year, 76. But there was this energy happening in the West that Lama could see where it was going. So he said, I want to put together a group we call the Central Committee, I think he called it, to discuss how to make an organization. So there was Marcel and Peter and Sister Max and me and John Landau and Wendy Finster and Petey Shane, and maybe there were 9, I think. I can't remember exactly everybody who was there. But so we used to meet in the evenings at the old library, which was upstairs above the office, and we wanted to call it the Yeshe Foundation. And so Lama immediately threw that idea out. He said, no, I want to call it the Council for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. We were like, oh, you can't market a long name like that. That's such a bad name, Lama. And he said, well, what are you people meeting? What are you? A group of people meeting as a council, isn't it? We said, yeah. And he said, well, so we're establishing a foundation, like a base, to preserve the Mahayana tradition, the tradition of Lama Tsongkhapa. So he was right. I mean, in a way, the name was also the mission statement. So it was called the CPMT. The FPMT was called the CPMT at first, the council, and the council was supposed to include not these 9 people so much, but all the center directors. So this was the group that would meet regularly, in Lama's idea, maybe every year, to discuss how it's going and what exchange experiences to develop the organization. And of course, important part of that was the IMI. So the first year of the IMI, 74, I was the director. The next year, Marcel became the director when I was traveling in 75. And I think he stayed the director in 76. Actually, I can't remember exactly who became directors after that. But eventually, we changed the name to the foundation, the FPMT, because that described what we were better. And then the CPMT, the council, is these meetings we have. We used to have them quite more frequently. Now I think the next one is in 2025, I believe, something like that. Here's Dr. Sparham. So everybody knows Gareth Sparham, the famous translator. He deserted us after ordination and went to Dharamsala. He went to the dark side to study at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics. But we're coming to that. So now I'm going to move on. One more thing from 1975, having dealt with the Inji Lama Puja tables. One day this American guy shows up. It was in December, I think, 75. And his name was Jesse Sartain. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with Sangye Khandro, the other Sangye Khandro, the Nyingma translator who was with Gyatral Rinpoche for so long. Her name was Nancy Sartain. She was his ex-wife, Jessie Sartain. So they were from Hawaii, well, at that time they were, and he had a publishing company, small publishing company in Hawaii, and he met with Lama and said that he would like to publish Lama's teachings, Lama Rinpoche's teachings from their 1974 American tour. So Lama called me over and said, because I was doing the publishing at Kopan, and he said, this guy wants to publish our teachings from America in 1974. Make some kind of deal with him, but don't give anything away, which means we keep the copyright. So we made an agreement to do a co-publication with his company, which is called the Conch Press. And Lama said, our company is going to be called Publications for Wisdom Culture. So in those days, when Lama made a center, he would call it Chenrezig Institute for Wisdom Culture, Manjushri Institute for Wisdom Culture, Vajrapani Institute for Wisdom Culture. So everything was for wisdom culture, which is, wisdom culture is the opposite of samsaric culture. So we did this deal with Jesse, and we published with this book, Wisdom Energy, 2 Tibetan Lamas on a lecture tour in the West. So this has gone through different incarnations, but this was the first Wisdom Publications book. And while I'm there, this is the second one, Advice from a Spiritual Friend. This is a couple of translations by the aforementioned Brian Beresford, teaching by Geshe Rapton and Geshe Ngondage, commentaries on Jewel Rosary and 7-Point Mind Transformation. So this was the second book, published by Wisdom. That one was published, Wisdom Energy was 76, this was 77. And then Lama moved Wisdom, actually, I'll come to it, but this was the third Wisdom book, Silent Mind, Holy Mind. It was published in England in 78. And we are at this very moment reprinting a new edition with some extra teachings in it, because this has not been available for 20, 30 years. Another thing we did at Kopan was, apart from those, these commentary kind of books we also did some Pecha things. This is called The Golden Method of Mental Purification. This is the Getzel vows, 36 Getzel vows. So we published this, I think, in 74, and then we did the Bodhisattva vows called The Golden Ornament of the Fortunate Ones, Pleasing All Sentient Beings. Sounds like a Rinpoche title. So we also published this in 1974. So this was mainly the work of the Sangha, the IMI Sangha. They're doing transcribing, typing, editing, getting things together. Okay, so that was 75. Then in 76, we continued meeting the Central Committee to discuss the development of the organization. Then in 72, 73, 74, there were 2 Kopan courses a year in the spring and the fall. Then when the Lamas went on their first extensive tour in 75, then there was only the November course. So then in 76, Pemo, the great late Thupten Pemo, taught the spring course in 1976. And then Lama went to Dharamsala, and there was the next large group ordination. So at the end of 75, quite a large group took Rabjung vows with I think with Lama or Rinpoche, I think maybe with Lama. There was Adrian, there's George Churanoff and Gyatso, Adrian Feldman, Elizabeth Drukier, Roger Kunsang, Karen Vallam, Roger Wheeler. So Roger Kunsang, before he became who he became, the great attendant, he was an electrician. So he was the one who installed electricity at Kopan in 74. He wired the place. So because we had 2 Rogers, he was called Electric Roger. And the other one, Roger Wheeler, helped Marcel. So Sister Max had started this business called Samsara in Kathmandu to try and make money for Kopan. She didn't think that she made enough money. Well, she made money as a teacher at the American school, but she wanted to build a business that would outlast her in case she died. She's still alive. So Lama didn't want her to do that. He wanted her to do universal education, but she insisted on doing a business. So she set up this clothing business, and then she moved to Delhi because it was better than Kathmandu. And then Marcel took over the business, and which he still does. Marcel was a guy who, after his first meditation course, went to Dharamsala to meditate and not come out until he reached enlightenment. But it didn't quite happen that way, and he came back to Kopan and he got sent to Kathmandu to run a business, which he's been doing for nearly 50 years. So, be careful what you don't wish for. Okay, so those people took Rabjung. George, Adrian, Elizabeth, Roger. Roger Wheeler was helping Marcel, so he became known as Office Roger. So there's we had the Office Roger and Electric Roger. Peter Kedge, Scott Brusso, and Susie Albright, and Margaret McAndrew. So they took Rabjung, and then they all got ordained with His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche in Dharamsala in the spring of 76. And there was also Wendy Finster and Angeles de la Torre from Spain. So quite a big group. So all of a sudden, the IMI almost doubled in size, not doubled, increased greatly in size. So during this time, the Nepalese government, so we had a really nice community going, and we had our routines and stuff at Kopan, and we had our jobs helping with courses and doing all the things we did, the monks and nuns. And we sort of had it figured out. But then the Nepalese government changed the rules, and we couldn't get visas to stay anymore. We could get 6-month, 12-month visas. And then all of a sudden, you could only stay for 3 months, and you had to change money in the bank, I think $100 a month or something like that, and show receipts where you change money officially, not on the black market. And so that really changed everything. So so for a while there, Marcel and Yeshikado and I used to go downtown to meet the home ministry and different important officials. And there was a very important monk called Kushu Tsechu, who we tried to get to speak on our behalf, to try and get an exception for the serious Western monks and nuns who were studying Dharma at Kopan and who wanted to stay. But so this dragged on for a few months, and finally they said no, and they gave us like 48 hours to get out of Nepal. So so at that point, the Lamas were getting ready to go on their third world tour. I'd been fired from my job as the tour attendant. Peter Kedge got the job, another blow to my ego. But Lama said, while we're gone, this summer, I want you to keep the Sangha together. So that was my job for the summer, to try and keep all of us together. And there are about 15 or 16 of us, something like that. So we had to leave. So so we went, well, people started scattering. I think Pende and Cherdak went to America, and they got involved in setting up, was it Vajrapani in Santa Barbara? You going to say something?
It was, we did this, Yeshe Lama Zopa did a course and Yucca Valley.
That was
And
77.
yeah, that was in 76. And then
77 that was.
yeah, 77, you're right.
66, you and Churdak were in California, I think, though.
Yeah, definitely.
And Sangye Kadra came for a while, didn't she? Was she there too?
Sangye Kadro came after the Yucca Valley course.
It was after that, okay. Anyway, so that was the beginnings of Vajrapani. It really began in full force after the Yucca Valley course the next year. Anyway, so people went all over. I think John Fay left. He went to, he finished up working in Bloomington, Indiana with His Holiness's brother, Tugtse Rinpoche, and doing stuff. Yogi went to Sarah. Marcel and Nicole went to Europe. Marcel, assisted by Nicole, did a course in Holland, and then they went to Manjushri Institute, which had just started at Conishead Priory. So then, but most of us went to Tushita Retreat Center in Dharamsala, about 15 of us, I think. And then Thupten Yeshe. So she was another American woman who'd become a nun. She got ordained in 1975, the previous year, by Serkong Dorji Chung. So she related to Rinpoche much more than she related to Lama Yeshe. So Serkong Dorji Chung, when he ordained her, gave her the name Thupten Yeshe. So, you know, the Lamas work in mysterious ways. So she and Thupten Wongmo went off to do a retreat somewhere in Dharamsala. The rest of us, we couldn't stay at Tushita because there was a group Vajrasattva retreat starting in a few weeks' time there, maybe 6 weeks. So we used to go down to the library for teachings in the morning, all of us, about 12, 15 of us, and then we had to figure out where we were going to move. We had the clock was ticking, so we looked all over the place. It was mainly Roger and me. Trying to find a place for the Sangha. And, there was a place where we could all stay together that we could afford. And it was very, very hard to find. So after weeks of not finding anything, we went to Circle Rinpoche and asked him if there was a puja that could be done to remove obstacles to finding a place. And he laughed and said, "Puja, ha, ha, ha. What you need to do is go and make prayers to the Padmasambhava statue in the main temple in Dharamsala, His Holiness Temple. So after teachings, we'd go up to the temple and we'd pray, Padmasambhava, please find us a place." So one day, we'd done that, and we went up. So you know how the library's down there. Then here's the temple, McLeod Gunj, and then there's the village, and then there's Nowragees where the bus comes, and then way up the hill there's Tushita. So it's like that. So we've been to the temple, we were walking back to Tushita, and a couple of the people, the monk, John Fay, so he was not in America yet, right? And John Schwartz, an American student who became director of Vajrapani, they got off the bus, and this Indian lady approached John Schwartz. He was an older, distinguished-looking gentleman, and she was a very uptight, rich Indian woman who really wasn't into approaching strange Westerners, but her mother, who was a bit tyrannical, made her. And she said, "Do you know anybody who wants to rent 13 rooms?" So John said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I do." So then he introduced me to her, and her family had owned that whole hill opposite from His Holiness's temple, where now the Baksu Hotel is, and I mean, so many different things there now. The whole hill is developed. At that time, there was an old English house called Mortimer Hall, and it had servants' quarters behind it. And there was a little house further down towards McLeod Gunj, just behind Amalosang's, the Tibetan doctor's office, and the post office. So she and her mother, so that when His Holiness moved to Dharamsala, the government took over, appropriated the land, kicked them out of their beautiful big old English house, and forced the mother and the daughter, Sunita Kakaria, into this little house. So that's where she was staying. And they had these servants' quarters. So we finished up renting those and renovating them. And so then about 13 of us moved into there, and we did retreat that summer in and we called it, and it was called the Inji Gompa. So that was the home for the Sangha, and I was able to fulfill Lama's orders to try and keep the Sangha together that year. So there's so much more to say about 76, but don't really have time. But while we were there, we did get some amazing teachings. We got Chidamani Tara Jenang from His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche, and we got extensive Vajrayogini commentary from Geshe Ngawan Dage. We got Yamantaka commentary from Serkong Tsenchab Rinpoche. I got a personal commentary on Ganden Lagema, the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga retreat that I was supposed to do, and we also had the Mahakala retreat from Lama. We had a commitment to do a 2-week Mahakala retreat. So I remember when we finished fixing up the Inji Gompa, it took several weeks. I went to His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche and said, I'm supposed to do these 2 retreats, Mahakala and Guru Yoga. Which one should I do first? And I thought I'd do the short one first, 2 weeks. But he said, no. Guru always comes first. So I did the Ganden Lagema, 100,000 Miktsemas, and by the end of the summer, I didn't have time to do the Mahakala. I still haven't done it. So like that. So then another thing that happened was the first Geshe went to the West. Geshe Loden went to Chenrezig Institute with Zazub Tulku as his translator. Dita led the 9th course, and Lama started a series of 5 teachings on Uta Namche, the Maitreya text. Then we got visas to go back to Nepal, so a lot of us went back to Kopan, and Geshe Jumpo Gyatso was there, so he gave us teachings on the Abhidharma Kosha. So we had to memorize a verse, and then he would give teachings on it, and then we had to memorize the next verse, and then he'd give teachings on that. But of course, by the time we memorized the second verse, we forgot. It was a bit like the small path. Remember Lam Chungpa in the Lam Rim? He had to memorize something like Om, Ah, something like that. So when he memorized Om, he'd forgotten Ah. When he memorized Ah, he forgot Om, something like that. So then the Buddha gave him a job sweeping out the temple, Dulpang, Vrimapang, abandoned dirt, abandoned stains. And then through sweeping the Gompa, he became an Arhat. So it was a bit like that, trying to memorize these Tibetan verses. But anyway, that's what we were supposed to do.
Nick, I was wondering, maybe you don't have to rush. Like if you think like maybe we can go later in a second talk, then you have less to rush because you have a lot to say, and maybe you like also to go really into depth about that time. So yeah. So please don't rush. We can invite you another time for the continuation.
Okay. I'm up for it.
Maybe you can continue 10 minutes and then maybe we make it a bit more dynamic with maybe questions or...
Well, so we've got to the end of 76. There is quite a bit more to do. So I'll just do a couple more quick things. One thing that we did soon after we got back from getting ordained in 74, we had this certificates made. I suppose the monks and nuns we had, it's called Sangha Ordination Certificate and Identity Card. So I hope you all have them, Pende, Gareth, I hope you have them. So you know who you are. So this was Rinpoche's drawing of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. This Garuda was Rinpoche's drawing. This was the logo of Kopan, Mount Everest Center, which was the local monks and nuns, the Sherpa monks and nuns. And then it had a seal. So that's what I looked like once. And this had a seal. You can't see the seal, but it's a stamp. And it's got, name, monastic name, nationality, status, monk, ordination date, signature. This is to certify that the bearer is a fully ordained member of the Nepalese Mahayana Center Gompa and a registered full-time student at the International Mahayana Institute. That's what it says. And it's Lama, signed personally by Lama. So we all got these. Do you remember them? And I think you guys should still have something. And then here it is, written by Yeshe Kadro. Public examination at Ogmin Changchub Choling Gompa, December 74 to February 75. I only did one. And then it's got the Gompa stamp on it to certify that I did my public exam. So that was something Lama instituted pretty early, that we were called out of the crowd to give this talk on a topic. And I don't think we were warned what the topic was. We had to give a talk. There's a story in Big Love about Jampa Sangpo, who in Dharamsala, when we went there in 75 before the tour, Lama called him up to give a talk, and he was so paralyzed with fear he couldn't give the talk. There's something like that. Now you can't shut him up. If you go Sunday mornings, he'll give you Yamantaka teachings online. He was the first Western monk, Jampa Sangpo. So that was what I wanted to show you. That I had these props. You see, what else? Okay, so I have other props, but they can wait till next time, since there may be a next time. Okay, well, I did leave out a lot of stories, but I think that's enough for today, obviously. So anybody like to comment or ask questions or criticize, please?
Please feel free to ask questions.
I just want to thank you, Nick, for the trip down memory lane. It was great.
Yeah, I love thinking about it. I mean, I live more in the past than the present these days, but working with the Lama's teachings. But it was my pleasure. Thank you.
I got an email from Wangmo La. So she's still a nun, I think. She's in retreat land in Washington.
Yeah.
She asked me to read her story. I don't know if she's too shy to read it herself, but she asked me to read, and it's a bit her memory lane of that period.
Yeah.
It goes like this. After the 5th Kopan course, 1974, Lama Yeshe suddenly had 12 of us who wanted to get ordained, 10 of those who were Westerners. In his great compassion and wisdom, Lama organized for us to attend the Kala Chakra with His Holiness in Bodh Gaya, then have the ordination ceremony. We traveled from Kopan to Bodh Gaya in an open truck. To be young and fearless again. I remember sitting on the ground in the hot sun, way back from the stage, among Tibetans, while they were talking with each other during the initiation, feeding their children, pouring tea from their thermoses. And there was no translation. Again, Lama, in his great kindness, organized for His Holiness to cut the tuft of hair prior to ordination. In a small room, we lined up, then bowed our heads to His Holiness, who happily cut with his scissors. Wow, 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 wow. A few days later, in another small room, the 12 of us sat in a small group with the likes of Ling Rinpoche, Serkong Rinpoche, Lati Rinpoche, Lama and Rinpoche, and received the vows. On the way back to Nepal, the first night on the road, Lama took us to an Indian restaurant and offered us a delicious Indian dinner. Mind you, this was a day or two after taking the vows. My idea is that Lama was showing us not to be too uptight, rigid. Back at Kopan, the 10 of us occupied the tiny rooms around the old Chenrezi Gompa. But now what? We didn't have older Western Sangha to turn to for advice or guidance, not like now where we have billions. But of course, Lama took care and gave us a daily schedule to follow. We would meet in the Chenrezi Gompa and chant Lama Chopa Jorje in Tibetan. Then we'd take turns shopping in Kathmandu for food and would rotate who did the cooking for lunch. As most of us were hippies, never married and so on, needless to say, some of us were better cooks than others. Sometimes there were nice little stones in the undercooked or overcooked rice. We calculated we each could live on $30 a month. Can you imagine? So there were a number of letters being sent home asking for the $30 if the parents could afford to help. During the day, we would do our various jobs, such as typing up the courses, notes for Nick, and so on. Then Lama had us meet again in the Gompa in the evening to do Mahakala Puja and then have a discussion group. Lama also had us change the traditional way of sitting where the Tibetan nuns used to sit behind the monks, but now we sat in rows across from each other, another instance of how Lama empowered his female students. One day we gathered in the middle room upstairs from the Kopan Gompa for a meeting with Lama. This is when Lama told us he envisioned the IMI to be an international organization for the FPMT monks and nuns. At one point, when he said, "Conditions are important, and like paper should stay away from fire, Sangha should stay away from situations which potentially break their vows." Suddenly Lama took a piece of tissue of paper and lit it. We sat there watching it burn, while Lama held it in his holy hand. Then he finally threw it in the fireplace. I think there was a small fireplace in the room. During that meeting, or another one with Lama, he told us that he wanted the IMI Sangha to wear donkas with the yellow panel, not just totally maroon ones. Sadly, this tradition has been lost in the IMI, but it's the actual IMI tradition. How wonderful it would be for all of us to follow Lama's wish, as the IMI wouldn't even exist without the great Lama Yeshe. Rinpoche told a few people that it's fine to wear the yellow. After this time, as a group at Kopan, gradually Lama sent some of us to other countries to teach, help at new centers and so on. So our original little IMI group disbanded. But there's still now an active IMI organization over the years, graciously and kindly headed by different directors. So this is from Wong Mo. So her recount of the good old days.
Yeah, pretty much what I said, I think. The talk from Lama was before we got ordained, though, the one she referred to. This was on this day, 50 years ago.
Is this a time I could say something, Nick?
Well, I was going to mention you because when she said after the ordination, they went back with Lama. He bought them tea or something. I had a mission that you had set up for me, Gareth, that I had to go to Delhi to see Geshe Ngawang Dragpa at Tibet House and get a parcel that you were unable to send, if you remember that story.
I don't know anything about that.
Yes, of course. Go ahead, please. By the way, I would say that after we left the Inchi Gompa, the great Garasparam took over as the manager of the property for the IMI, and was responsible to pay the rent to Sunita. And I don't know how many years that went on, but Sangye Samdrup, George Dreyfus was there, and then Kamalekshi Tsoma was there, and then she took the place over, and it's become Jamyang Churling Nunnery. Anyway, not to preempt you.
Yeah, no, seeing the IMI book really takes me back because, really I became a monk mainly because of you and Marie, Yeshikantara. And we were up in the mountains, and there were only 3 of us up there. And it was such a huge leap. I don't know if it is for others, but for me, I mean, it's such a culturally foreign thing, even though one has tremendous amount of admiration for what one's hearing still. Culture is usually, but anyway, you and Marie became a monk and a nun, and I felt left out, so I thought I'd go to do it too, But that was a very lucky thing. But then looking at that IMI book is what I'd like to mention, because I had that IMI book, but I was in Dharamsala. I went there really to hide, It was a place where there were mainly Tibetans, and so it wasn't so foreign. I didn't feel so foreign there. It's just my own personality. But then, as you said, there was a yearly test for IMI members. And so one year it happened in Tushita Center. And I came in and I had to give a talk. And I could still remember, I think it's terrible, really. I was a monk, right? And it was on, the Vinaya, on the morality for monks and nuns. And I stood up and blathered on about some nonsensical thing. And I do remember that Massimo Corona afterwards, he was not a monk, but he stood up and made a coherent presentation. But one of the things that I remember most about that is having said the talk, having given the talk in front of Geshe Ngawang Targe and many others, Lama rushed up to me, that's Lama Yeshe, rushed up to me and said, never say that I'm a student of yours again in public, please. And I always loved that, but it was, he was such a kind man. He would do anything for anyone, even people like us, right? But, for God's sake, don't let anybody know that you're my student if you talk like that. But let me finish then by saying that the 2 lamas, as Nick said, the monks and nuns were there, and that was lucky for me because I was pursuing, a course of study in a traditional Tibetan environment, which I did for years. But to have those people with whom I became ordained around, it was wonderful. And that they would come later on, they're seeing Pende. He would come, and I can still hear the chants as the IMI monks would be, the leaders of the offerings or whatever it was, the teachings that were being given, and the Dalai Lama would be there, and he would be leading the chant. I can hear, but wandering here, let me stay on track. So every year, Lama Yeshe, this is way back in the 70s, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa would come for a short time to Dharamsala. And I'll leave you with this, that, you feel that you want, more than anything else, never mind to have your faith and so on, but to be loyal to friends, to be loyal to the groups that have given you a lot. And so that was always a bit of an issue with me. It was like, if I just run off selfishly doing my thing, And I was a monk, and I can think of nothing more fortunate than to become a monk or a nun. And every year, even before I asked him, he would come up and say, "I'm very happy what you're doing, dear." Tremendous people. So that's my contribution.
Well, I think we're all very fortunate that you chose that path, and I was honored to publish your first book, I believe.
That's true.
Tibetan Dhammapada, and first of many great books like Kuna Lama. You weren't here. We talked about Kuna Lama Rinpoche's teachings we received in 75. I guess you were in Dharamsala at that time. But you translated the Precious Lamp in Praise of Bodhicitta and Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the Tantric vows, and more recently, Perfection of Wisdom in how many lines?
Oh God, so many, But you know about that.
Thousands of lines. And Abhidhamma and
If I can
commentaries.
mention one thing, because Wendy Finster, back in those days, was a nun, and one day she came up to me and asked me to translate the Kunu Lama verses. And I always remember that, because it was tremendous good fortune for me, obviously, to have to translate those, and wisdom, as you say, really through you, Nick, doing those things, getting it going and so on. It was really lucky to be able to translate those wonderful verses. Anyway.
Venerable Tenda.
Thank you so much for sharing, Gareth. I only met you, I think, one time in London around 2002 when you translated. I don't know anymore for who, but anyway. But thank you so much for sharing your memories of that period, and your connection with monkhood, monastic life. So I wonder if anyone still would like to say something. If at Zoom we have 18 guests, so you would like to say something.
Question, I guess.
There's a question here in the room. Yes.
What was some of the personal experiences of the benefits of being a Sangha member?
So the question is what was what did you see as benefit of from your personal experience when you were a monk? This was a question there. So if you go back in your mind to having been ordained, what were the benefits? So you assume it's correct? Okay. Did you, maybe you both can answer. Maybe also Pende.
Yeah, let's hear from Pende.
So what comes to mind was that before becoming ordained and just having, traveling around looking for something to make the life meaningful, to be able to transform oneself into a better person and so on. There was the Dharma, of course, and I had met the Dharma in Dharamsala at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. But, you'd attend lectures by Geshe Nawan Dargay, and then afterwards you would just, hang out with friends and the like. But once we became ordained, we had a structure. You had vows that you were responsible for, and therefore you had to organize your life in a way that would enable you to preserve those vows, have the appropriate discipline to preserve those vows, and have opportunities to not only listen to the teachings, but have a community to discuss the teachings with, and to have a schedule of which consisted of, like the morning puja, prayers at lunchtime, evening pujas, and discussion groups. And so that having that kind of structure in one's life was very important, very useful for being able to subdue one's mind, to gain knowledge and be able to work with that knowledge to expose one's whole mind to that knowledge through meditation and discussion. And so that to me was the most, that stood out as being the great advantage of getting ordained.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, Garrett, you also would like to say something?
I was a monk, for a total about 27 years. And often people say, well, why did you stop being a monk? And it strikes me the question is not formulated well. It's not why somebody stops being a monk or an ordained person. It's that your good luck runs out. It's tremendously good fortune, tremendous good fortune to be in a situation where you just keep on being a monk or a nun. And in my case, I was working in a university at the time. And the people around me were really good people. But every morning I would reconstruct my monkness. And if I didn't wear a red tie, people would say, well, where's your red tie? And so slowly, I noticed that I was not going to be able to, as James, as Benny was saying, the structure was not there for me to be able to really be a person who is going to, in the future, be able to stay in accord with these rules and regulations. Not ones which were in any way hindering me from doing something that I wanted to do. I mean, I think as monks and nuns, we always had the freedom to do whatever we wanted. You could stop being a monk or nun whenever you wanted. It was not like you're in jail or something. So the rules were not stopping one doing something one wanted to do. They were allowing me to do what I really wanted to do. And more than anything else, what I found over the years, it was truly to be happy. Unbelievable happiness. Because there's a reason for it, a really deep and wonderful reason. And so it's not like, I beat myself that I'm no longer a member of the order. But I never think I left it. It's always that the good fortune to be a member, I no longer had that. And so that's really always what I remember. And so seeing both those here on the screen who are actually ordained members of the order, and seeing the others of us who were and for whom it was an important thing, gives me tremendous pleasure, just tremendous pleasure. So that's my recollection, if you will, of being a monk.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for your warm words. And Nick, you also would like to say something about this question?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, after my first course, what I said to Anila Ann, I wanted to do Dharma full time. And then I saw, or maybe I heard, maybe Rinpoche said that, if you want to practice Dharma, becoming a monk or nun makes it easy and profitable. So I was always into making things easy, and I liked making a profit. So that was part of it. But I didn't get to the part where I stopped becoming a monk. That will come in part 2. So I don't want to
run ahead.
I don't want to issue any spoilers at this point.
Very good. Yeah, so we keep then our curiosity.
So if you want to learn how to become a layperson, you have to tune in next time.
Yes, thank you so much, Nick, if I make you call like this, for your contribution tonight, for sharing so much of the past. So also all others who contributed, I would like to thank everyone, the IT people, Robin and Tundru, the translators, all the translators, Venerable Chantal, Venerable Paloma, Venerable Ciliana, thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know if I forget, Drokar is there, of course, he's just doing the IT today, our office manager for since so long. So yeah, I want to thank you all very much for sharing. It was enriching. Would like to say a very few words. So the IMI at this moment organizes these that we try to emphasize to do the prayers for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So you can contact us if you want to participate in this 24/7 recitations. We don't get the schedule always full, but I think it's still very nice that we stay kind of connected and encourage each other to do a recitation every week. So if you want to take part, you can find also the details how you can sign up for the schedule on our website, and otherwise you can contact us if you have any question. So it's participation is appreciated. So yeah, and then for the rest, thank everyone for contributing to the Dharma on this planet, for all you do. I hope we can dedicate the positive energy from tonight to the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the first place, then for a quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for long and healthy lives of all our other gurus, all the teachers, the FPMT and the Mahayana Tradition. So may they have long lives, may all their spiritual wishes be fulfilled. For all monks and nuns all over the world, may they keep their vows purely, be of inspiration to others, have the courage to continue, overcome obstacles. And then for all the sponsors, everyone who contributes to the existence of that is possible, it's dependent arising. We as monks and nuns, we depend on the generosity of others. So for may all the sponsors of individual monks and nuns, for of the sponsors of monastic institutions, of the sponsors of the IMI itself, may they all have the same benefit as the monks and nuns themselves. May they reach quick enlightenment. So maybe all develop our bodhicitta and wisdom, realize emptiness very quickly. Maybe all reach our spiritual goals very well, and also for those who we are in connection with at this moment, may be able to have the right words, the right inspiration for them to help our fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, colleagues, those we interact with on a daily basis. And may there be world peace, of course, and may all disasters in the world, the natural disasters, stop. Anyway, thank you so much. And again, thank you. And so happy to be connected with many of you. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Ciao, ciao. Au revoir. Bye-bye.
Tashi Dele.
Well, it was nice to see you.
Muchas gracias.